Greetings! Days 4 and 5 of Measuring for the Art Show revolve around using 10 strips of 10 paper to measure the sides of your posters instead of the Unifix cubes. So you're going to need a couple new things for today. Not too hard, not too much work to create these materials. You are going to need some new sets of paper to measure. That's the colored like posters that kids were measuring on days 1 and 2. You'll need some new pieces of that. I'm going to try to make those in advance, but if I don't get to it, it won't be as hard as making the first set because they don't have to be specific numbers. You can just sort of take the paper sizes you have and just trim it down to be a whole number of cubes and use that. But hopefully we don't have to worry about that. We'll have them made in advance. The thing to note about the new sets of paper is that you can use the sizes of those to differentiate for kids. So for your kids who are really still struggling with this activity, make smaller pieces of paper. And for the kids who seem to really get it, you can try to get some that are bigger or in the higher ends of the 10s, 19 to 18, 19 instead of 11, 12, or that even go over 100. A couple things to note about this. Appendix C is what it says to use for those, but I've actually created a document where that I think will work better. So can you see this? So this is going to be better for us for a couple of reasons. Number one, you can see the strips are connected to each other, so it's just less cutting for the kids. If they can cut a straight line between them, then they don't have to cut, they have to cut half as much as they would if the strips were just like floating on the page. Number two, these ones match the size of the paper, the cubes that we're using perfectly, and the ones in the book don't seem to do that. So this sheet is what I recommend you using. You'll only need to print out one sheet of these for each kid. It's 10 strips on a page, as opposed to the other one also, which is 5 strips per page. So you would need to give 2 sheets of paper for each child. So the lesson flow is that you're going to start the day. You're also going to need to print out a recording sheet for each kid, 2 of these per child, and then each kid is going to need tape and scissors. Definitely a pair of scissors for each child. They can maybe share tape, but they're going to be working individually to create their own strips of paper, so you need to have enough supplies for each kid to be working at the same time. Today's lesson, you're going to do an around the circle mini lesson, just like yesterday. You're going to tell a little story to develop the context, and then they're going to work on an investigation of making their strips and then using them to measure. The mini lesson of around the circle is going to be basically exactly the same as yesterday. You should get used to the routine. You should know what to do, but use different numbers. So if yesterday they started with 3 and 13 and 7, today do 9 and 2 and 8 or whatever. The real difference today is that we want you to try going past 100. So 9, 19, etc., until you get to 99, and then go on to 109, 119, 129. Now, you're going to keep looking at the place value pattern here, but don't focus on the columns by asking about hundreds, tens, and ones, like 129 has 100, 2 tens, and 9 ones. Instead, start establishing that 100 is the same as 10 tens. So you had 9 tens in 99, 9 tens and 9 ones. Add another 10 to that, and you have 10 tens and 9 ones, or 11 tens and 9 ones, and 12 tens and 9 ones. I want to show you that using color or circling is a really clear way to show this pattern. So if you have your markers on the board, if you wanted to highlight this with color, it's really clear to see that pattern. 1, 2, 10, 9 tens, 10 tens, 11 tens, really makes it pop like that. And kids, this will blow their little minds. You can do that with 1 or 2 numbers today. Again, just don't go past the 10-15 minute mark so you have time to do the rest of the activity. After the mini lesson, you're going to develop the context. So you're going to do this by telling a little story. Say, yesterday we made such a great blueprint as a class. Last night I took that blueprint home and I gave it to my friend who's going to cut the signs. But then this morning I remembered I had even more paper that we can make signs for. So I thought, oh my goodness, my class is going to be so exhausted with all this work. But then I had a brilliant idea. Since so many of you kids were using 5s and 10s to help make measuring quicker and easier, we could use paper 10 strips instead of using the cubes. And then we could have these strips to use all year long, and they'd be much easier than having all those loose cubes all around. Isn't that a good story? And then you show them the paper strip that you made. You take it out, let them see it, touch it if they want to, hang it up on the wall. Then it's time for them to do the work. Hand out the pieces of paper. The first step is for them to individually make their strips. This can take the rest of the period. This is one of those days that might take extra days, but that's okay because days 4 and 5 go together. So if day 4 takes 1.5 days, then you can just sort of smush them together into day 5. Kids are going to work to make their strips. They're going to cut out the pieces of paper and tape them together. Then they're going to work with a partner to use the strips to measure the new posters. This can be a new partner if you want, or you can be your old partner. Sometimes it's nice to mix it up when there's a potential break. Please note that some kids are going to do a bad job at taping their paper together. There are going to be gaps or overlap. That is okay. Let them do this. Don't fix it. This may lead to different measures, and that is an amazing teaching moment. As this happens, as this starts to lead to different numbers, confer with the individuals, or you can even bring the whole class together for a quick little check-in on this and talk about why those gaps matter. If the child was doing it just because they're clumsy but they get it, at this point you can now jump in and help them. If they weren't paying careful attention to that detail because they didn't think it was important, then they've learned a really valuable lesson during this. But again, if you have this conversation and kids are still struggling with taping them together evenly, now is a point after you've had that conversation where you can jump in and help with the fine motor work of cutting and taping for them. Day 5 is theoretically just a math congress to discuss the work, bring together the ideas and the measurements taken on day 4. However, please note that at the end of your math congress conversation, the kids are going to go back to using their new paper strips to remeasure the posters from days 1 and 2. So while they're going back to remeasure, if there are a couple kids who didn't finish all the measurements from day 4, they can use this time to finish up that work. You really don't need to push the day 4 measurement too far into too much extra time, unless kids are really, really behind and they spent like a full period taping their strips together. Okay, so for day 5, you're going to need to create a new chart, a chart that looks like this here. That's 3 columns: paper, measurement, and total. So they're going to sit with their partners from day 4, and you're going to ask for measurements from the new papers and discuss them one at a time. So let's say someone measured, you had a paper that was line chart paper, for example. You're going to write that here. You're going to describe the paper. And the kid is going to say, well, it was 32 cubes, or somehow describe how long that was. Probably they'll say it's 32 cubes. So you need to lead the conversation to calling it by its 10s in one name, by saying it's 3 10 strips and 2 more. And you're going to record that here. 3 10 strips plus 2 more. And then here you're going to write the totals, 32. You can, of course, do that in the reverse way. If they say 32, you can write that as the total and then fill this part in if necessary. And then this is going to be, probably half your period is going to be you guys talking about gathering the information, talking about where to place the number on the paper strip, the paper measuring strip, and then filling in the chart. And they should get used to, as they say the number, they will start to get into the practice. If you model it, they'll say, it was 26 cubes, and they'll come up to the board and show, well, that's 2 10 strips plus 6 more, and they'll mark that here. And then you could write that, 2 10 strips plus 6 more. And then here you'll write 26. Maybe that was a I don't know, orange paper. So that's the conversation here where you're filling in the chart with this new chart with the measurements from your new pieces of paper. As they fill in the chart, they might start to notice the place value pattern. 3 10s and 2 1s, 32. Those are connected. 2 10s and 6 1s, 26. My, oh my, this does look interesting. So just bring this to their attention and keep asking the question, like, will this continue? Is this always going to work like this? Once all measurements are recorded, and you've had that little place value conversation, then go ahead and have the kids return to their papers from days 1 and 2, those original posters, and remeasure them, but now using their paper strips instead of the cubes. Then as they do that, you're going to add that new information to this new chart, or sorry, that old information, because you already have those numbers, but you're treating it like it's new, to the new chart. But you can check the numbers from day 1 and 2 to make sure that they match. If there is a discrepancy there, that's another great place to have a little conversation. Follow the lead of your students.